game there and they were a little soft, but you can't call it a slump. They're 12-0. G2 still nigh immaculate performances in the vast majority of their games, but already into the thick of picking bans. Shen, Orianna taken away from ROCCAT. Malzahar and Vladimir on the opposite side for G2.
Now, something that Phaxi's had a lot of proficiency on is the Gnar. I wonder whether or not G2 want to try and respect that. Maybe for Maxlore, they want to take away the Graves. So far, it looks like that power picks are going to be the name of the game for G2. The biggest respect they have is towards Betsy. He did have a phenomenal game on Vladimir in their series versus Misfits. But it will leave a fair number of junglers available. Graves is up at the moment. A number of AD carries. Ezreal and Ashe are up too.
Ooh. All right, Graves. I was getting excited. I thought he was going to take it away. I thought we might see some of that action, but nope. Sticking to the tried and true, the powerhouse in the jungle, Graves himself. But ROCCAT firing back quite quickly with some picks of their own. Lulu now paired with the Rengar in the early game.
And I always enjoy watching Maxlore play Rengar. I was fortunate enough to play against him when he was only a Rengar one trick. Back then, he was quite the terror. Now he's going to be paired up with a Lulu, so already you have a very strong engaged tool for the side of ROCCAT. If you're G2 now, you can look to either pick a powerful top lane or in the form of Rumble. It will give Phaxi the opportunity to go towards something like the Gnar, but you also perhaps want to lock in your support right now. Karma, very powerful in the meta, gives you a guaranteed pushing lane. Alternatively, you could just go for something a little bit safe in terms of AD carry. Ezreal, Zven has demonstrated a great proficiency on. Perhaps they want to lock that in early, especially with the Caitlyn already banned away.
And it's G2's choice. Do they want to match, pick a support of their own? And the answer is yes. Now it's on ROCCAT. Do they want to try to pinch some pools here, or do they just want to match with the top lane pick? Do they want to find something up against the Rumble? And it's going to be quick. It's going to be the Gnar fired back. So two pretty big comfort picks coming in. Expect has had some fantastic performances on this Rumble, and it's for Phaxi. I mean, this is essentially his best champion when we look at the impact he's able to have in these games.
There have been discussions on the analyst desk and the cast as well, whereas the meta shift with more carries up in the top lane certainly has favored ROCCAT. The fact that Betsy has been bringing out these new and interesting picks also makes things pretty interesting. And look at this, G2 showing so much respect towards Betsy. Both the Vlad and the Swain being taken off the table means that Betsy is going to have to try something creative. Now, earlier in the day, we did see Nukeduck bring out some creative mid laners. But whether or not Betsy will look to try and repeat that performance
I don't know if that's the series you really want to look to decide your opinions on the 7.6 meta. Unless, of course, you're playing solo queue, in which case it probably reflects quite accurately with all the Shaco and Yasuo in there. However, one comfort pick has been taken away from Betsy so far. Will they take another one? He was incredibly proficient on that side lane Echo. Kind of a surprise to myself, at least when I saw him walk it in. Thought it would be mostly the Swain and the Vlad, but it is, in the end, the Ezreal that'll be taken away. So 3 AD carry bans in Phase 2.
Yeah, but that means that a lot of AD carries are taken off the table. If you're Hjarnan, my natural pick for him would be towards the Sivir, something that he brought a lot out during the early season. It was synergized nicely with the comp already because they've got a pretty good engage tool with the form of the Lulu and the Rengar. You have the Gnar ultimate as well. You then just have the On the Hunt followed by Thrill of the Hunt, and you have a lot of hunting going on the side of ROCCAT.
The On the Thrill of the Hunt combo. I'm sure someone has a more clever name than that. Let us know what it is. Hashtag EU LCS at LOL eSports. There has to be a better hunt name combo.
There must be. Rather than Grr, Arg. Now, if you are G2, you're only looking for your bottom lane and mid laner. If you want to be safe, we saw a lot of Syndra come out from PerkZ last week. Now, Kalista, this is cool because Zven is yet this split to win a game on Kalista.
He's determined to find one here, though. Now, he is still, I think when we look at Europe, probably the strongest Kalista player we've ever sent internationally.
Oh, yeah.
Very strong performances. Unfortunately, not as much on the international stage, but has dominated, at least when Kalista has been a popular pick in the past, but not so much this season. Just a few picks here and there. Han Sama Sven among the number. Final pick will be the Syndra in the end, so safe pick coming in the mid lane for PerkZ, something he was absolutely insane on in the Fnatic series. Solo zoning caps out of so many fights, and ROCCAT really taking their time on this final pick.
It's very likely going to be Echo. You already mentioned it earlier on, something that Betsy has brought out before. And it does very nicely into the Syndra 2. Funnily enough, Yasuo 2 works quite nicely into Syndra as well, if you want to be a little bit creative.
Oh! Yes! I was wrong. I thought we'd see the meta. We're seeing a new meta.
Oh, look at their
faces.
Look at that. This is awesome. This is a mid lane Yes, mid lane,
AP Nasus.
AP Nasus.
You remember it, folks. You remember when it got popular right after the changes. You hated it, and then it disappeared for some reason. We don't know why. But now it's back. It's back here on the LCS stage in the hands of Betsy. Now, Vedius, as a mid lane main,
yes,
thoughts on this matchup?
I think that it is really obnoxious for the Syndra, actually relatively early on, simply because of the sheer amount of push that Nasus can have. However, you have to remember that Syndra, she has the range advantage, the ability to stun a very big, clunky, slow mid laner in the form of Nasus. Makes it easy for Trick to then come in and set up these ganks. It's going to be exciting. Remember as well, like, Nasus has a lot of health, so it's difficult for the Syndra to one-shot. He can itemize pretty effectively by going for a very early Spirit's Visage, which synergizes so beautifully with his kit. But in terms of build path, I have no idea which way he's going to go.
It's nice, and it's refreshing. The unknown, we will see who comes out on top. Well, if you're a believer in the unknown, or if you're a big fan of ROCCAT, vote at LL Esports. Hashtag ROC win, or hashtag G2 win if you think they're going to remain the kings of Europe in this series, if they will find the undefeated split. A lot of pressure on both these teams. But here we go, ladies and gentlemen, getting ready for game one. The final days of week 10, counting down, playoffs all but locked, but ROCCAT, the team looking to change that with a win here against G2 Esports. And it's time for game one.
There was such great banter on Twitter as well. You know, you saw Perk saying stuff like, wouldn't it be the greatest April Fool's joke if we lost to ROCCAT? Well, the joke's on you. We're going to destroy them. And then Maxlore comes back and he was just like, yeah, we'll see who'll be doing the destroying today, mate.
That doesn't sense.
That's how the British speak, okay? We always throw mate to the end of
you built this up like some top-tier banter, and that just sounds like, okay, we'll see if you are correct, sir. Like...
Yeah.
All right, well, let's focus in on the game. We have, I feel like, 4 known quantities on the side of ROCCAT, and while we may not quite understand exactly what the Nasus is going to bring to the table outside of wave push, let's talk a little bit about what this ROCCAT comp is looking to do.
Now, the ROCCAT composition is actually really good at team fighting. One of the greatest strengths that they have is their ability to force engagements with the Sivir ultimate, with the Rengar ultimate, the fact that Lulu can help support a lot of the front line as well, so whoever decides to engage. You also have to remember, there are a lot of squishy members on the side of G2. They are running what is effectively a 5-carry lineup with a lot of off-tanks. Trick will get to natural a lot of resistances from his kit. Expect is going to be building slightly off-tank because he'll get a lot of HP from the build path that he chooses to go for. But rather than that, like, this is a very squishy lineup, which means that when you have all of these really strong engage tools on the side of ROCCAT, it could become very difficult for G2 in the mid-game to really prevent ROCCAT from forcing a lot of their fights. But what G2 do have is really potent lane strength. Kalista and Zyra, very powerful duo in the bottom lane. Syndra, known for being dominant during the laning phase, and the same goes for Rumble. So if G2 are going to get any advantages, it'll be within the first 10 to 15 minutes of the game.
Have to see if they can get some. Nasus already grabs a small advantage for himself as he does manage to steal away 1 Raptor from Trick. Not a massive factor here, but a small XP advantage for Betsy means he will get the fast level 2, and the pressure's already coming out as predicted. But PerkZ, with the level 2 of his own, trying to respond, at least for now. Vedius, when we look at the bot lane, outside of, if we ignore the Lulu and the Zyra and we just talk about the Sivir and Kalista, this feels like the bot lane meta of days past.
Yeah, Zven was once famous for bringing out these carries like Kalista and Lucian. If you give him the ability to make the outplay, then he will make it. And in the past, Kalista used to be a really good pick into Sivir because of how difficult it was for Sivir to spell shield things like the Rend. And with the changes to Rend not too long ago, where now it's much easier to trade, you can stack multiple Rend, you only need 1 kill on the Rend to get the mana back. It makes trading against the Sivir all the more easier. The one thing that that the Kalista will lack early on is the ability to push hard, which is what you are seeing from Hjarnan for the time being, just constantly shoving in this bottom wave and making things a little bit obnoxious.
But G2 are pushing back, and they are using the power of Zyra to do it. So the lane mostly even at this point. Both teams battling it out. Nothing really happening quite yet. Vedius, usually we look at the junglers to influence this, but there's no Lee Sin. It's the Graves, it's the Rengar. Can we expect much pre-level 6 from either of these teams?
For Trick, there's a high possibility. It is difficult for him to tower dive, but notice that he will be spending a lot of his vision investment towards the top half of the map because he's very aware of the fact that Expect is hard pushing, so he wants to make sure that G2 have good control. Meanwhile, in the bottom lane, that is another big avenue for him to try and gank, especially pre-6 before Wadid can get his ultimate up.
Yeah, and meanwhile on the fan vote, ROCCAT fans coming in clutch, 61%.
The faith is real today.
Now, I don't know if that's faith in ROCCAT or like we want to see Fnatic miss playoffs, but whatever it is, good job voting, people.
Or it's just like we want some Susan action. We want Nasus going to town.
I mean, oh, well, this is interesting. All right, I was going to say so far they're pretty even in lane, but now we have Spell Thief's Edge on the Nasus. Now, I remember Brand in the mid lane having Spell Thief's Edge, but what's the thought process here behind the Spell Thief's Edge? Vedius, I know I'm putting you on the spot. I know we don't see a lot of Nasuses, but just theory craft with me here on this pick.
It's certainly odd, because the weird thing about it is when you kill minions, you don't actually get to take advantage of the passive. So the logic, I think, behind it is that when you throw out your E, it's not going to instantly clear the wave, right? So the idea is you throw out the E, you hit perks with it, you get a bit of additional gold off the back of the ticks from the E, and then, following the damage, you then get to kill off all of the minions in the minion wave. So it's just a lot... the idea is to get bonus gold from just constantly farming in lane. And I guess it's like a mid laner's version of Cull, in a way, just because you get every so often, every time you throw out a bit of harass, you will just get that bonus bit of gold. I'm just fascinated as to what he's going to build it into.
I mean, will we see a Frost Queen's claim Nasus? Will we see the Spooky Ghost coming out?
That's like, this is a mystery, I have to admit. Like, this, I've definitely played against mid lane Nasus, and I know the general concept behind it. His ultimate also has a lot of damage in these mid game fights, but this build path is very novel to me. I'm very fascinated to see what he's able to do with it.
Well, we'll check in on that a little bit later. For now, I want to shift our attention, at least briefly, to the bottom side of the map. And while the top lane trades are interesting, there's kind of a big question mark on G2 right now, and that is Mithy. He has been struggling in the recent games. Now, he is still absolutely one of the top supports in Europe, but going from immaculate player to making mistakes, to getting caught out, to these mistakes against Fnatic is a little concerning for the team, for the G2 fans, as we move closer to playoffs.
Now, Mithy, he has had like up and down performances throughout the split. I feel very early on he was very dominating, but then post-IEM, during IEM, he was just kind of, he was in a bit of a slump. He was very aware of his own playstyle. Even after the Fnatic series, he was vocal on social media about how he felt he wasn't playing his best. But he is now playing on Zyra. He has the great ability to be extremely lane dominant. He has the opportunity to turn around these big team fights with one big ultimate or one big route onto those key targets. And I think that with a champion like this, we really can see a player like Mithy really come into his own.
Well, can't be 100% sure if it's Zven or if it's Mithy, but right now the G2 bottom lane is dominating when we look at that CS. 54-39 after the wave crashes into the tower. Hjarnan and Wadid are really struggling in this lane, and for the most part in their last 5 games, the games that they have won, they have been a pretty strong point for this ROCCAT lineup.
They really have, but when you go up against Zven and Mithy, especially on the champs that they're playing, meanwhile in the jungle.
Trick going forward. 1 shot, 2 shot, does have Storm Raider Surge, hoping to find the proc. Maxlore leaps over the wall, nice ward placement. Well, looks like it will take him to safety. Trick looking for a little bit more damage, isn't going to get it. Powered Battle Roar, just going to take Maxlore out to safety, but some aggressive early play.
That was actually really smart from Maxlore. Notice how he used the red buff to create a slightly bigger gap between him and Expect, and then he used his Q whenever it was available to constantly just always extend further and further away from the people chasing him down. He was very lucky that Expect did not have his ultimate available, otherwise that very likely would have cost him his life. But even if he gets away with his life, it will cost him a red buff. So another small gain in favor of G2.
We can already see a 1K gold differential just coming in from lane differences so far. Maxlore going to work some of that back by taking the red buff. Rengar comes out, flash forward, Trick locked into the wall. Decent start, first blood for ROCCAT. Betsy still walking forward, just throws down a bit of damage and backs off, but that'll swing the gold back for ROCCAT.
So ROCCAT, they punish Trick for staying a little bit too long in their half of the jungle. Bear in mind that after Maxlore was chased out, Trick not only took the Raptors, but then went up to red. This allowed ROCCAT to reposition themselves, figure out their game plan, and they were able to get this great collapse down onto Trick, and ending themselves first blood.
ROCCAT may not be able to fight back. Usually it's ROCCAT. Remember when we look back at them when they were losing, ROCCAT was the team that went even in their lanes and conceded kills. Now they're the team that's fallen behind a little bit in the laning phase, but they're finding kills on their own. This is a huge shift from what we've seen in how they play the game.
And I think it's important to remember as well that even though Hjarnan is at a deficit in the bottom lane, as long as he scales nicely into the mid late, he'll be absolutely fine. And this is what we were talking about in terms of Trick overstaying. Notice that you can't really push up mid, especially at this point in the game, because it's a Nasus. And expect as well, the lane had already been evened out. So it made it so much easier for ROCCAT to be able to get that 3-man collapse. And they knew full well what Trick was, because they had just seen him push Maxlore out before. So a little bit greedy from Trick, but also just a good opportunity for ROCCAT, which they took advantage of.
And good pathing as well, right? He could have run further away from the wall, but the Nasus coming up forces him against it. Gnar knows, knocks him into the wall. Overall, well played, well coordinated. But the bot lane domination just continues, and this is brutal to watch. Anytime anyone steps forward, Zven is throwing out autos, rending left and right, and it's just relentless. Trick as well now coming in. Tower's getting lower and lower, maybe hoping to punish ROCCAT if they decide to stick around for too long. Maxlore nowhere to be seen, has already backed out. It's a 3-man unit here. They may not need the dive. They may just look to break the tower with the man advantage.
So the thing that G2 have been doing is, while Hjarnan and Wadid have a fair amount of wave clear with the Sivir and a Lulu, every time they walk up to the minion wave, they're getting harassed by both Mithy and Zven. The dueling and trading power of a Kalista Zyra is so strong that they're taking advantage of the low range on a Sivir, and that means that by slowly getting chimped down and slowly getting forced back, that has resulted in G2 constantly knocking onto the door of the tower without any kind of jungle support from Maxlore, and Trick investing all of his time into the top side of the map. This has given so much freedom for G2 to just slowly work their way onto this bottom tower and pick it up for themselves for free.
It's such a good advantage to have in the early game. And this is normally the kind of play we expect from something like a Caitlyn, where she's going to chip down, where she's going to have that range advantage. But just the confidence of Zven and Mithy to push forward, to force a character like Sivir, who we normally expect to have so much wave clear, back under her tower, back in advantage. But now PerkZ playing a little bit with fire, does burn Ghost here. Phaxi going to go into mini, though, has no way to follow up. Both teams just poking at each other, looking to find weaknesses, looking to find some opening or opportunity to force a fight.
A lot of posturing around the Rift Herald for the time being, mainly around the vision. Interesting that Zven is actually returning to the bottom side. They're just going to keep their bottom lane there for the time being. They realize that the dragon is still available, so if they rotate up, that gives ROCCAT the opportunity to push down bottom. While they may lose that top tower, they can exchange it for a mountain drake. So G2 for the time being, they don't want to sacrifice that. Instead, they're the ones that are going to look to push up. You can already see all this deep vision that they've gotten. Trick will likely clear the top half of his jungle, and then G2 will look to make that rotation over to the dragon and make this their next focal objective.
Mountain pretty crucial to have as well, as we look to break down more towers, as G2 already have that tempo advantage as they continue to pressure out and push. Zven and Mithy for now left on the bottom side of the map. Very often we see that swap to the top side, but they seem content to just keep racking up the advantage here. It's a pretty brutal spot to be. Zven has already gone back and got a Blade of the Rune King up against just the pieces of the Essence Reaver on the side of Hjarnan.
He's actually skipped it over even getting his tier 1 boots. But now we can see both teams posturing around this objective. This will probably be a big point to fight, and G2 have to be very careful. Remember, we talked about how the big advantage that G2 can gain is during the laning phase. They've successfully done it down in the bottom lane. Top lane is fairly even. Mid lane has a very small advantage as well. And G2 now need to try and utilize this bottom lead that they've gotten across the rest of the map. And if they just blindly go towards a Drake, that's going to result in ROCCAT having a bid window where they can claw control over the game, because we know how powerful their team fighting is. We know how easy it is for them to force a team fight. And so G2, they're just being smart, they're being patient, but they can't wait too long. Otherwise, ROCCAT's comp is going to scale up and they will be able to take control of it.
But it feels like we're still pretty far away from that breaking point. So G2, maybe we need to see more aggression, but it's not immediate. It's not right this moment.
They have time to play with, but it has to be on their minds, right? We have to be seeing a lot of setup. And right now, that's likely what they're going to be doing, is they look to try and fight for these control wars that ROCCAT have already set up.
Yeah, the battle for vision, so crucial, so often underplayed, I feel like, from a lot of teams, but not from G2. They know they want this before they start any fight, so they can force the fight on their terms, not risk walking face first into that ROCCAT composition. They can't just dominate any team fight, the Gnar, the Nasus, and it would be brutal for Zven to walk face first into that Wither.
Very quickly, I want to mention that you can see Boots' Swiftness picked up for PerkZ. This is really good into Nasus, because of the Wither, a really powerful slow. Those boots will actually mitigate a lot of that and will make the laning phase a little bit easier. Anyway, going back to the Dragon, G2, they have control, and right now they're looking to take it for free.
Mithy killing that ward all but confirms suspicions for ROCCAT, though. They're knowing that this one is going to go down, but Betsy's collapsing. Maxlore's still alive. PerkZ, has he overstayed his welcome? Mithy trying to block off the choke. Betsy running forward. Fate's call takes him to safety, but the spears are coming in. The shotgun bolts as well, looking to lock up Betsy for at least a little bit of time. Here comes Expect. All goes down, not going to connect. ROCCAT walk away unscathed, but Mountain Drake goes to G2 and the tower may follow, but Betsy says no with the wave clear, buying at least a little bit of time.
Really good execution from G2. We talked about how they needed to be calm, but they also needed to be proactive. And notice how they were just very gradual with their vision. They didn't try too hard to force it. It was very slow and patient. They took one ward at a time, and then when they knew that the river belonged to them, then they moved towards the Dragon. They didn't try and rush it down. They were always aware of the positioning of ROCCAT. It resulted in a clean objective. They didn't lose any members, and it almost resulted in a fight that G2 were actually in a better position to win. So that is how you play around these Dragons, and this is why G2 are the best team in Europe, because they really understand how to utilize the strengths of their comp and at what point in the game to do so.
Good to see, taking steps now to the undefeated split, taking steps to secure at least this game one. G2 eSports, you can see 16 wins, 2 losses with leads at 15 minutes. Of course, don't really lose very often at all. So,
but what does stats mean in the face of ROCCAT, Drakos? Like, you could tell them that they don't have a hope in hell of winning. And then
what's a stat to a Nasus mid?
Exactly, right?
To a Frost Queen claims Nasus mid. Tell me about it, Vedius.
I mean, it's a little weird. I mean, it gives you a lot of mana regeneration, which is great. The CDR is good. It'll help you stick to your targets, right? Like, sure, Nasus is pretty easy to kite. He's not running Ghost. Often when you did see him top lane, he used to be the Ghost plus TP so that he could better stick to those annoying and running away top laners. So it will help with that. And it's the same sort of idea that we were talking about earlier on, which was that when you throw out the harass, you will get gold from the passive first, and then you clear the minion wave. But it's unique, that's for sure. I expect him now to build like the Spirit's Visage. I feel like Spirit's Visage would be really good on him, especially with his passive, which does give you lifesteal. But for the time being, a lot of mystery still on the cards. Yeah,
a lot of mystery for the Nasus, but tower trade going in favor of G2 in the meantime. So while we figure out what is going to come from this pick in the mid lane, what it is going to amount to, G2 are unconcerned, continuing to press their advantage. ROCCAT even back off the tier 1 tower, so not even a tower trade. G2 just going to look to get a 2 for 0. I don't think they have the creeps to do it, but Phaxi maybe hoping he can find an overextending G2, maybe hoping his team can force a fight.
Look at the positioning of Mithy, though. He realizes that ROCCAT could come for a flank, so he positions in a way that will deter any members of ROCCAT trying to get this collapse down. He can use his plans to zone them away. He always has the threat of the ultimate, but now ROCCAT, they want to go on the offensive.
Frost Queen's claim. Maxlore, Thrill the Hunt, comes out, goes down. Nice pickup coming in from Maxlore.
And there it is. The speedy, slowy ghosts. They catch down onto their target. They make it easier for ROCCAT to be able to find these picks, but they are still at a deficit. So while it's great for ROCCAT that they can get themselves a kill, just look at the positioning of the map. Expect he pushed that minion wave all the way up to the tier 2 and down in the bottom lane. ROCCAT, they were not able to get that tier 1 in the bottom lane, and they took a chunk of damage from their own tier 2 tower in the top half of the map. So sure, G2, they might have lost a kill, but in terms of pressure and control over the map, they are still by far and away ahead.
And we keep coming back to this, but the scaling in favor of ROCCAT is the thing that they are holding on to. G2 has the advantage, they are moving better around the map, but ROCCAT has that inevitable and terrifying late game. And a big component of that is Betsy. We check in on his stacks in the mid lane, about 135 last I checked, growing as well. So behind schedule for all you Nasus one tricks out there. I know you like 100 every 10 minutes or better.
Okay, it looks like Betsy's actually going for a Luden's Echo next, which means that will add to his wave clip. On top of that, it gives him a bit of movement speed and will add to his initial burst. So again, it's all about being able to stick to those targets. We know how easy it is for him to get kited in these team fights because he is this slow, lumbering canine. But for the time being, it's taking them a long time to reach that point. And G2, they're fully taking advantage of this. They're really utilizing the strength of their composition at this point in the game, and they're always moving in, looking to get vision, playing around these objectives. But now Expect is being
Betsy goes in, Phaxi flashes over the wall. Equalizer comes down, but Phaxi's just going to stand in it. 1, 2, 3 stacks of the Hyper, waiting for the Gnar, going to hop to safety. We'll have it. Boomerang. Not going to connect in the end. Small trades here, but G2 actually pulling out advantage in the end. Phaxi overstaying his welcome.
Betsy, because he was forced to go through the river, he couldn't come back the way in which he wanted to, which resulted in more chip damage coming down onto this tier 1 in the mid, which is the main focus for G2 eSports. Now, it did result in 2 top laners trading their flashes, but given the laning phase is largely over, it's not the biggest deficit. It's going to have more impact in these mid-game fights because now Phaxi's not going to have that opportunity to flash in and get that big multi-man Gnar ultimate off.
And of course, having to itemize the Hex Drinker early for Phaxi as well. Putting him in, he's not quite on the Black Cleaver. He's not quite able to chase down each and every opponent that stands in front of him. Much less effective at pushing in the side lane, even if he is better at dueling out on that Rumble. But I think I want to shift our attention to the mid lane because PerkZ is a man who's been performing so well recently, where in the past he's been shaky, he's been going down on side lanes. He hasn't always been the strongest member of G2. Recently, he's been looking so good. And in this mid lane, even against the pushing power of Nasus, PerkZ up 30 CS 20 minutes into the game.
I have really been impressed with PerkZ's growth throughout the split. Like, right at the start of the season, he made it very clear that his mechanics were a little bit weaker, but he was working on his mentality, his perception of the game, how to not get tilted. And we can see that 10 weeks later, not only is he arguably the strongest mid laner in Europe right now, but also he has such a great mindset. He doesn't seem to tilt anymore. He doesn't do these random moves. We're never criticizing him for getting caught out of position.
Oh.
And he's even getting himself solo kills.
Yeah, finding someone else caught out of position. Wadid a little too confident there. A lot of members with tanky life bars. You got a Nasus who can save himself, a Rengar who can mitigate damage, a Sivir who can spell shield, but Lulu, she's so good at saving other people, cannot save herself.
That was through the ultimate as well. Like, that sucks for Wadid.
I mean, we look at it.
Level 13 to 8.
And once again, we look at it, it's 218 CS to 189. He has a kill as well. So he basically has almost 3 kills at this point in terms of gold advantage. That's a fed
I mean,
mid lane.
yeah, this is a good point to be at this point in the game. Morello's already completed, working towards what I expect to be a Luden's Echo. Could also be a Death Cap, depending on how keen PerkZ is feeling. But just G2 again now, they get themselves that kill, they got the Dragon, they know that PerkZ is just pushing up mid constantly because he is the stronger mid laner at this point in time. Look, that's a lot of damage.
This Cripple would call it the skill button. Push the skill button.
Outplayed.
Hit the skill shots too, to be fair.
I mean, he did. He did. His vision was denied though, he didn't actually get to see Mercs because of the control ward in that brush. But still, the gold is okay. ROCCAT aren't at such a deficit that it's impossible for them to come back. The pressure is unrelenting right now from G2. But this is what you'd expect from the composition that they're playing and the way in which they have been playing throughout this game so far.
But I don't think it gets easier from here in terms of pressing an advantage for the side of G2 because Kalista's strong right now. That 2-item power spike that we haven't talked about since Kalista was last viable in the meta. Runehands play the Rune King, that's exactly where she wants to be, but Sivir, she's at the point now with enough attack speed, she can clear any wave. Nasus, it's the same thing with the AP, and I feel like G2 really need to catch someone out because you can't just force an objective against a team with so much wave clear power.
I agree with you. I think that it's something that G2 have to be very mindful of. We'll see how, following this point on, they will be able to execute the composition. A lot of grouping. Ooh. Look at the damage!
That hurts. Just immediately half of Mithy's health. The other half would have followed if he stayed in for the duration. But the Nasus is getting scary. Now, of course, he's not going to do that much damage, Vedius, to everybody on the team, but...
Ooh, I don't know about that, because, like, his ultimate, bear in mind, like, his ultimate does do damage based on the target's maximum health that is nearby, but it is magic damage, and it is based on maximum health, which means that it will shred fast, and it does scale with AP as well. And given that he does have the Luden's Echo, he got a fair amount from the Frost Queen's Bane as well, means that it will hurt, especially with targets with very little magic resistance. Notice that there is a lot of armor being itemized because G2 feel that the main damage dealers are people like Hjarnan, like Maxlore, like Phaxi. They're not showing as much respect towards Betsy's damage as maybe they should, but it's difficult to say because we haven't yet seen him in a team fight, right?
It's also the single AP target on the enemy team when you got 3 other auto attackers to worry about. So G2 taking the safe buy, focusing for now on clearing out these waves. Runehands making it quite easy, and Betsy content, it would appear, to keep holding the tower, but the Rengar ult comes out. That may be the signal to start the fight. Maxlore's gone in. PerkZ caught and all alone. Holding on for now. TP coming in from Expect. Maxlore, Hjarnan going in. That flash is aggressive. Fate's Call used. Phaxi on the side, maybe hoping to chase it down. Uses the hop forward. Stun comes out. G2 just going to pull back. They're not risking anything in this fight.
Now, Expect, he did use his teleport, decided to cancel it. G2, they just disengage. They realized that the fight was not going in their favor, especially with Betsy not having joined the fray as of yet. So no members end up going down. Only the Ghost and TP were used on the side of G2. The Flash was used for Hjarnan, which could come to hurt him later on into the game. But G2, they still maintain control. The gold lead is still relatively healthy, but it stayed the same for a very long period of time.
They do have the invisible scaling of the Infernal in the mountain, however, which may help them as they move forward. Maybe some Baron creeps, but unfortunately, even Baron creeps not that effective against the Sivir Ricochet. This champion, so effective for so long in pro play because of the strength of her ultimate, but I think the thing that often went underappreciated is just the endless wave clear that comes out from a pick like Sivir.
So now it's been a fairly slow game. It hasn't quite been the same action-packed series that Vitality.
I know. Trevor's like, oh, I had to cast 21 kills in 5 minutes. I'm like, that sounds great. I would love to do that. Like, not more than once, but once, that sounds great.
But while the game may not be as bloodthirsty, maybe it's not as entertaining. That's what we're here for, Drakos. We're here to bring entertainment.
I thought the macro was supposed to be entertaining. I thought we were supposed to study the plays,
interesting, it's fascinating. But instead, let's think about what kind of champion would you be? If you had the choice, what kind of a champion would you be?
That's hard, Vedius.
It's hard?
Do you mean what champion would I be in the context of League of Legends?
Yes,
like,
League of
what
Legends,
character
of course,
would I most associate? It's hard, because these people are all very heroic, and I'm notoriously not heroic.
Are you trying to say that if I was inside a burning building, you would just say, there are other casters, right? Is that your decision making?
I mean, potentially. Focusing back in, though, 25 minutes in. G2 still looking to maintain undefeated. Taking it slow and steady, not looking to risk anything, but we feel like they may need to risk more because ROCCAT are starting to fight back, getting turrets back for themselves.
Oh, that's a dead Zyra. We missed that one. Maxlore, he went hunting. And that's where we had the, ooh, actually on the hunt. Was not actually used there from Hjarnan. So now we actually have the 5-man group from ROCCAT posturing towards this bottom tower. Expect is topside. He's going to be forced to go back because his TP is unavailable as of right now. I think the focus for ROCCAT is actually going to be the next dragon that will be spawning right now.
Mount could be important to have as they move forward. Now Kalista, of course, the terrifying thing that we, yet another thing in the seemingly infinite kit of tricks that Kalista has is her ability to secure these major objectives like Baron. For now, G2 focusing on securing these towers, breaking down the top side as ROCCAT are caught kind of a little too focused potentially on the Mountain Drake. Give up all of the Baron vision, take the mountain, but don't get really much back in return.
But they've kept Phaxi down in the bottom lane. Notice that there are actually no clear. ROCCAT are afraid of the possible Baron rush from G2. Remember, they do have Kalista, who is great around these neutral objectives such as Baron and Dragon. And the fact that Phaxi is still knocking on the doors of this bottom tower. So now let's see how things happened. Ah, surprise cat.
Classic surprise cat.
Always the deadliest. So
of course, Mithy, there's not a whole lot you can do at that point.
There is.
Tempting to ward his jungle.
He could have flashed, but there were still brushes available for
Oh, there's no getting away.
Yeah, so he just decided to save the Summoner Spells, accepted his defeat.
Yeah, sticking a little closer to Zven now. Will have the Fates Call to save him if any occurrence needs it. Zven, not really any tools on the team to keep him safe and healthy, so he's built himself to QSS. Maybe looking to keep himself alive as they move forward. But Hjarnan, he's approaching that 3rd item point. Not quite the 4 items we have from Sivir as that infamous win condition. But still all too lethal as we move further in the game.
So now I'm looking at itemization. ROCCAT well on their way to completing 3 major items. It looks like the Betsy's actually going to go for the 3rd item's Leandries to get that additional burn. Really going towards hitting people with lots of HP, it seems. A lot of damage over time abilities.
Hunt comes out. Maxlore buying a little bit of time, trying to hop to safety, but he's caught in the middle of the team. Mithy's pulled back and safe for now. Maxlore's going to get cut down. That's the shutdown. The fight pulling back for a brief moment, but Expect is on the side. Paying some attention down. Betsy dishing out some damage of his own, but both teams backing away. ROCCAT just going to accept defeat in that instance.
A lot of the focus in these fights has gone towards Mithy, and every single time Zven has been there to pull him out of harm's way. That could have been a one-for-one trade, but I feel like ROCCAT's target focus really needs to shift, because Mithy, he got everything down. He didn't even need to use his exhaust in that exchange because he was pulled to safety. He didn't end up losing his life, whereas Maxlore did. Now with the jungler gone, with good vision control around the Baron, G2 are actually in a prime position to move towards that objective.
Interesting choice, but it's so hard, right, against the Kalista. I think maybe not comfortable playing against this pick, maybe too eager to hope they can catch Zven off guard, but he's always eager, always ready to pull Mithy back if necessary, but doesn't even need it in the end. However, for now, pause. We will update you as we get more information. Maxlore has paused the game. But for now, things look pretty good for ROCCAT, right? We can say a G2 3K gold lead, and this is huge for G2, and G2 are definitely in control of the game right now, but they're playing on a timer. They're playing on a clock. They've got a couple, well, they got like 10 minutes until ROCCAT are terrifying. But at the end of the day, can ROCCAT even out-execute when it comes to finding those fights? Can they force G2 to fight on those terms? Because it's still so difficult to deal with the Syndra. So difficult to deal with Zven as he is kind of relentless in these team fights. It's just chasing down weaker targets.
That's the big question really for ROCCAT, because while they definitely have been on an upswing, there's a lot of debate around like how good are they as a team? Like, are they actually really one of the top contenders? And sure, like, given your recent performances, you've definitely shown a lot of growth, but now you are going against the strongest team in Europe. And even though you have a good team fighting composition, you have to remember the fact that G2 are a good team fighting team. So even if they don't have a comp that's built for it, they still know how to play around these team fights. They still know which targets to focus. Their communication is very clean. We've already seen how many times Mithy has been saved. And it's something you always have to factor in, sure. Like when you look at from a compositional perspective, if you assume that both teams are equal, this team should be able to win out. But when it's ROCCAT versus G2, even if you do have a team fighting composition, can you really expect them to be the better team fighters than the legends that are G2?
It's so rough for these guys, right? And it's so crucial too, because they went from, hey, we might be the worst team in our group, we may be going to relegations, to, hey, we are safe from relegations, to, oh my God, we're winning everything. We can take Fnatic out of playoffs. Massive emotional roller coaster for the side of ROCCAT. However, in the meantime, just waiting. Players eager to get back in. We eager to get back in as well.
So I have been updated. It is Maxlore, just a graphical issue for the time being. It is currently under investigation, and that is the reason for the pause. So as soon as that is updated, we will return to our regularly scheduled broadcast.
Okay, you gotta say it. It's like the TV thing that everybody wants to say.
Yep.
And maybe not. Probably many better things to say than that.
It's now been ticked off my bucket list. But for the time being, G2, they currently sit in a lead with about 2,500 gold in their favor, 48.2k to 45.6. Only 5 kills this game, but in part I think it was also an expectation, largely because of the way in which both teams actually care. As you said, G2, they want to have their undefeated split, and ROCCAT, they want to have that chance. So not quite as crazy as our first series of the day.
Well, for now, I mean, we look at this game, we look at this series. I feel like if we had two compositions that were better in the mid game or both better in the late game, we would see teams more fighting more frequently because they'd be even.
I think we will have more fights, though. I think
definitely as we get later. It's going to come. Once ROCCAT are comfortable, they're like, all right, we got 3 items. We got 4 items. Time to dust off, time to focus up, time to get into those fights. But for now, it's just G2 who are focusing up. However, as league officials investigate the problem on stage, let's head over to the analyst desk to take a look at the game so far.
Thank you very much. I know you don't want to see us right now, but, well, you know, gotta live with it.
Speak for yourself.
Speak for yourself.
I've been waiting to see stress all day, you know.
Aww. They are investigating the issues currently on stage, so that does give us a chance. You guys stop flirting, please. That does give us a chance to look at the pick and ban a bit more in depth, and for your point of view as well. Stress, maybe walk me through this. What was the most surprising factor?
I think the most surprising factor is the Nasus at the end of this, which is the easy statement, but it goes in with what we've come to expect from Betsy as a player. It's a tanky, wave clear focused mid laner that can delay the game, stall, and will this time become a side lane threat. This is more towards the Echo than the Vladimir that we've seen. This is a lot more about controlling one of the side lanes. Nobody's going to be able to kill him later on in the game, so it fits his champion pool well.
So talk to me about the matchup specifically, Crepo, and the build, and what exactly it does for Nasus.
I mean, matchup, he's still going to be pressured in early. Like, Nasus is like this annoying wave clear champion in E, but he does give up the priority early. the casters were a little bit confused, like where's the spell thief coming from? Because it is actually very kind of canon and core for an AP Nasus to build that item, because he needs something else other than Wither to get 2 people. So he definitely needs the ghosty effect from spell thieves, and he wants to rush it as fast as he can, because while you're sitting on tier 1 and tier 2 of the spell thieves item, you don't actually get any gold. We saw it, you know, he earned 100 gold from poking enemies up until the point where he finished it in the Frost Queen's Claim. But then it becomes really annoying to play against, especially if you factor in G2's composition. Like, they're playing 5 squishies, you know, no frontline. We've seen how hard it was for Mithy to kind of play into that Nasus.
Exactly, and the way the pattern goes, we were talking about it, you were enlightening me that it's you put the E down after the spell thieves, then you catch them with the Wither, you run up to them, cue them, that Wither, and the E's been ticking, and suddenly no health left. And that does so much damage in team fights, as well as the ult. We haven't even factored that in.
And he's getting to the disgusting point where you actually hate him, because now he's finishing Liandry's. So you have both the Liandry's and the ultimate shred effect, which are based AP spell effects. So once this guy pops his ultimate in a team fight, he's going to go up to quite a annoyingly high HP of that ultimate effect of Nasus. The problem is you need to focus him, but it takes a lot of cooldowns to focus as Nasus. And you don't really want to, right? Because it's quite annoying. The problem is if you don't, he's going to shred your team down. So the only reply to do so is actually to kite him in the team fight. But then you need to be very aware of the E cooldown. And if you're not used to playing against AP Nasus, this can definitely kind of throw you off guard. And that could definitely happen to G2 later in fights, because so far it's been very calm. So we need to see how the first team fight ever plays out.
Yeah, it has been very calm, but I feel like Mithy's only given up 2 deaths to that specific scenario, and one of them was to Maxlore.
Yeah.
And in the third case, we already saw Kalista was able to pull him away and pull him to safety. So I kind of feel they've already figured it out, which adds another layer of difficulty to ROCCAT. I mean, this might not be the case, but I feel like they're not falling for the trap.
I think a lot of this comes from the fact that G2 got an early game lead, specifically from bottom lane, with this Kalista into the Sivir, and that means ROCCAT have never been able to go out on the side lanes and then come back in. And unless you ever get out to the side lanes and get some of that time, what ROCCAT are trying to do doesn't really work. Like, it can, and as you said, teamfight damage can be massive, but if G2 are too far ahead already, Nasus is going to be a little bit behind that curve.
Yeah, definitely. Nasus wants to play on a side lane, right? But this is, like as Stress pointed out, they're kind of stuck in a gridlock. Not a big fan of the Sivir pick in particular, because it loses very hard versus Kalista, because it's impossible to time your spell switch versus Rens. Eventually they got pushed in. They lost their tower super early. So I think any of the blame should be put on the Sivir pick and not on the Nasus one so far. If that was a Varus and the mid game was a little bit more even, they could put Varus mid. Both side laners could play on the side lanes, and then it would be a lot easier to play.
I definitely think we can't put blame on anything yet, as we haven't seen how the game is played out. But I do want to kind of question the ROCCAT that we've seen being successful on some picks that you guys mentioned, you know, the Vladimir and the Zven and whatnot. Of course, a couple of those were banned out. But is it a risk to take to try this new strategy in that first game of the series? You absolutely have to win. To me, it's more like something you try in a game 2, or do you disagree?
I think it's a great opener, honestly, because it fits a similar trend. Like, how has ROCCAT been picking up wins, not by straight out cheesing, but by picking slightly unconventional champions, but with a purpose and a goal. And this Nasus seems to be working, because especially against this no tank comp from G2, every time they're slowly setting up their front line, somebody's eating this first tick of the E from Nasus, and they're immediately like disincentivized to move further. If they can keep their vision locked up, all ROCCAT need to do is win one convincing fight. They can go to Baron and the game can be over.
And not only that, if they can stall this Nasus, the wave clear that comes from his kit, the Sivir, if you buy enough time, without a frontline, Sivir will switch on later on into the game. And if ROCCAT can hold G2 to like a 40-minute game, then those team fights are even more deadly.
Yeah, because you're so busy looking at this Nasus the entire game and its damage, but late game, like, you'll just forget about Sivir, and that is the problem. So if Nasus can buy enough time for them, then Hjarnan can actually carry these late game fights.
Yeah, we'll see if that happens, and it seems like they seem to be banking on that a bit, as they know that they can do that in the late game. So if we look at G2's composition, you guys touched on it already. You said it's actually quite risky one to run. And is the lead that they have now enough?
It's kind of what they call often like an SKT composition, where it's not necessarily risky, but it's much harder to execute, because obviously the game is much easier when you play with a tank in the top lane.
Right.
G2 could have snowballed more. I think we have like a replay of an invade early that actually puts them behind a little bit in terms of pressure, that they needed to snowball.
Yeah, I think when you look at this composition, there are a few teams that have successfully done it. Here is the replay you were talking about from Trick.
Yeah, so this is like Trick going into the enemy jungle. He actually pokes out Maxlore. Is this later? I think this is the second. Or does Maxlore just go around and alley-oop? Because eventually Trick ends up dying here.
Yeah, I think this trick does end up dying on this exchange. It's as he's coming back out, I think Maxlore has enough time to recall and come back. Here's the second phase of the play, where, off the recall, only a couple of seconds later, Trick doesn't quite have the vision on where Maxlore's coming back into the jungle and overstays his welcome. An uncharacteristic mistake from Trick, the fact Phaxi beats him down, Nasus roams up from mid, and
This is really beautiful flash, because like PerkZ is ready to react, but look at Betsy and Phaxi kind of joining in. This is the ROCCAT that we see more. These guys are working as a team. Yes, they deal with the initial invade. I think if that invade goes right, ROCCAT are actually under a lot of pressure. But this actually relieved a lot of pressure for them.
Well, we will see what happens. Do we have an update for you guys? League officials have informed us that Maxlore reported seeing particles in a fog of war, which influenced his pathing around the Baron pit. Now, League officials have determined that the impact to the game is low, to the point where the game will continue from the time of the pause. We will be back in game shortly. Back to you guys at the desk.
Thank you very much, Shocks, and the rest of the desk for breaking that down a little bit for us. Talking a little bit more about the AP Nasus. Of course, Crepo, no stranger to it, as it was played a little bit in high solo queue towards the start of the season after Nasus got that major rework. Spoke a lot about how infuriating this pick is to deal
annoying.
with.
It's always been annoying. Like it's the other thing that people often aren't even aware of is the fact that his E even reduces your armor, right, while you're sitting in it. So like right now, he's going to reduce 40 armor of the targets that sit inside it. So when you've got all this additional AD in the form of like Sivir and Gnar and the Rengar as well, like, and I mean, it makes sense why you're getting all these extremely early armor boots, right? Like,
definitely makes a lot of sense. But here it is, ladies and gentlemen, back from the pause, game 1, G2 versus ROCCAT. Now, for those of you just joining us, you missed a small fight, and Maxlore died. And now here we are in a game where G2 are eager to find a larger advantage, maybe a Baron, maybe break down some of these towers, because ROCCAT have the good old cane of inevitability in the hands of Betsy and the slowly stacking Nasus and Sivir. And it's going to be a rough road for G2 if they can't close this one out quickly.
Yep. So we've talked a lot about how the scaling for ROCCAT is always very promising. There's that fantastic team fighting power they always have available to them, and they are working towards those 3 item spikes, which are the big swing factor in favor of ROCCAT because of how well their team does scale. But you can never really underestimate G2 given how strong they are just as a team when it comes to team fighting. And thanks to the great vision control they have around this Baron, they're going to go for this objective right now.
Not even about team fighting, about focus, about decisive calls. Maxlore maybe hoping to find a way into the pit, leaps in, exhaust goes down, no! Zven smites it away, has the rend, it's all too easy, but the fight keeps going. Expect takes down Hjarnan, PerkZ looking for a little bit more. It's the double kill for the Rumble in the meantime, and G2 are the team to walk away with Baron.
Amazing Rumble ultimate from Expect. So easily swings the fight in favor of G2. The fact that they just decisively go straight towards the Baron, they nuke it down, they know that they have Kalista and the Smite to in order to guarantee it. ROCCAT, their only options are ready to go for that 50-50 Smite battle.
Well, it's not even a 50-50 against the Kalista.
Exactly,
if it's played right? Like, there's no option.
But they had to go for that gamble. That was ROCCAT's only option, and G2, they played it too well. They knew the strength of their comp. They knew that they could secure it without any real fear of Maxlore being able to steal, and the Baron is going to make it so much easier for them now to siege onto these towers, and the wave clear will be significantly less effective.
Starting to push in their waves for now. The majority of the team will back off, maybe spend some of that newly acquired gold, but this is the explosive play we're hoping to see from G2. Insanely confident as we take one more look at it. Maxlore, just desperation.
You can see the rest of ROCCAT, they're not close enough to be able to get the steal. Maxlore was hoping that perhaps an early Rend would come out, or maybe an early Smite that he could gamble on and take away. Unfortunately for him, his Smite ended up being too early, and that made it even easier for G2 to be able to get the secure. And then that Rumble from Expect to land onto both Hjarnan and Wadid as they were escaping just demolished them. They were in such an unfortunate situation that they could not get out of.
And it's rough. It's rough for ROCCAT. You cannot afford to get caught out like that. And Hjarnan, while he can, in theory, get so much damage under his belt, be a massive late-game threat, that equalizer lives up to its name. Makes him even with the rest of everyone else, makes him so easy to take down, and now G2 just continue their onslaught on the bottom side of the map. Maybe hoping to break open an inhibitor here. ROCCAT may try to find a fight. Equalizer goes a little bit wide, and Hjarnan's doing his best to clear out the creeps. Tower loses about half health, but for now, nothing else. No major flanks.
He did use his ultimate, looking for a possible engage. And there was this one ward you can see just towards the dragon area for ROCCAT that they could have used for a Phaxi flank. but decided against it. Instead, G2, they just take themselves a tower, they back away. So again, G2, they're playing this calm, playing it calculated, not trying to be too rash. They know the possibility of ROCCAT's composition enables them to be able to come back in these fights if G2 don't play it properly.
Betsy on the side. Does have Phaxi as well. Zven has to be careful. Don't want to be slowed up. Maxlore the one in trouble. Expect goes over the wall, finds Maxlore, takes him down. Crisp rumble play so far. Phaxi sees him over the wall, but G2 are just splitting up. They're stopping ROCCAT from grouping, and ROCCAT, they have a tier 2 tower on the bottom side in their sights, but G2 may respond with something of their own in the mid lane.
Expect using the blast cone to get the flank down onto Maxlore as he ended up getting nuked out by PerkZ. While ROCCAT, they do have positioning on the bottom lane. G2, they still have the Baron buff. They have a minion wave in mid lane. Their eyes are on the inhibitor.
Everything they want from that exchange. Take down Maxlore, still look to get more. Trick goes forward though. Let's see what else he can get. Turns into a little critter. May get healed up. Is Mithy gonna get the heal down in time? He will. Wadid, is he gonna be next? Down comes the equalizer. Up goes Phaxi, and down go the dreams of ROCCAT. In this game one, it's all too pretty to watch. And meanwhile in the mid lane, the hits just keep coming because Zven and PerkZ, they're breaking the base.
They have everything they could have wanted. ROCCAT lose 3 members. An inhibitor goes in the favor of G2. And they are styling on ROCCAT right now. Very impressive performance from the G2 squad.
So good to see, so good overall to watch. From the side of G2, we had questions. They were playing it slow, and for the G2 fans, they had to be worried. But it comes to the late game, and G2, they take some risks. We can't lie, but it pays out in their favor in the end.
And you can see the power of Trick. Level 16 Graves. He'd already completed 3 of his major items. And while he does lose his life at the very end there, the major part of his job had been done. He's able to get himself a 2-for-1. And just a straight-up outplay.
Feeling himself a little too much. You know,
Yeah.
He's like, all right, I've already outplayed 2 people. I can get a 3rd for sure.
So it hurts his KDA a little bit, but still very impressive. That is a big Baron power play. G2 knowing exactly how to utilize it. Now they have all the freedom in the world. Sure, ROCCAT, you have a great team fighting composition and you can stall for a while. You have a lot of wave clear available to you. And I mean, G2, they can just divide and conquer.
Just look at the number of people who are going to use those Infernal Dragons that they've been building up. They're going to use all the gold they've stacked up. You got the Rumble, the Graves, the Kalista, the Syndra, 4 threats on this team. And while we sometimes think not having a tank can be so hard to play with, when you've got this big of a lead, every single member of G2 can just take out 1 or 2 people that stand in their way.
And I love seeing teams experiment with this full damage lineup because it is very difficult to execute and does rely on a good understanding of how to play the early game. But we have to remember that all these advantages came from Zven and Mithy in the bottom lane, just dominating over Hjarnan and Wadid. And it's great to see the way in which G2 utilize that advantage across the rest of the map. You do have to wonder, like, will they be able to net those advantages in other teams? Will they be able to, thinking about playoffs, will they be able to rely on Zven and Mithy to be able to build them a lead big enough in order to play a very similar style in the future?
And how much of that is ROCCAT drafting a weaker bottom lane in the early game? So you can see G2 been in control of the game from the start in terms of gold. Once again, we continue to give the scaling advantage over to the side of ROCCAT, but how much longer is that really going to last? Because the gold lead just continues to grow. 8K advantage in the favor of G2. 2 Infernal Drakes, both teams with a Mountain Drake to match. And now another pause, hopefully a brief one. Once again, we'll update you. Looks like Maxlore, once again, the source of the pause. We will keep you updated as we find out the issue. In the meantime, Vedius, I feel like G2 took some risks. I think ROCCAT took some of their own, picking this really late game scaling composition. They're trying new picks in the form of Nasus. And as Shox was saying earlier, we can't call it yet. We can't say that either decision has been bad because the game hasn't ended. But for now, it looks like G2 may have made the better choice, picking such strong, aggressive lanes.
I think they had a good understanding, knowing that they would be able to build a big enough advantage down into the bottom lane. But looking at their draft, like they very early rotated in the Syndra, the Zyra. With all of the AD carries that were banned away, G2 expected the Sivir ban to come out. And then they realized, right, okay, if we force him onto a Sivir, we can get ourselves the Kalista, and then we're guaranteed a winning bottom lane. And the fact that G2 played around the draft, anticipating the picks to come out from ROCCAT, is what enabled them to guarantee this bottom lane advantage and then swing it in their favor. So I think that it is just smart decision-making coming out from G2 and good preparation up against ROCCAT.
Definitely. And of course, an update on the pause. It looks like the client did crash for Maxlore, so there is a PC restart. However, once that happens, once he is able to get back into the game, we would continue, assuming there are no other outstanding issues.
It is easier to play League of Legends when you have a client. It does make the game, I would argue, just that bit easier to play.
You understand the client? I mean, the part that I'm talking about is the game itself, right? And then nothing actually works without it. You got that?
That was the joke.
I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure. I have to let you know sometimes, Vedius. We talked a lot about taxes and adult responsibility today.
And I was like, what is a tax? Turns out they're expensive. That's what they are.
It's a rough life, adulthood.
Yep.
Slow, steady process. School doesn't prepare you for the hard truths.
And given I look like I've only just left school, that's my argument for not understanding anything. It's a hard life. But right now, the hard life is being put onto ROCCAT. Sitting in an 8,000 gold deficit, 8,500.
But this is their moment, right? This is the montage moment. This is the right. You go in, you're Rocky Balboa. You don't get to take him down the first time, right? He takes you down. You got to come back. And right now, ROCCAT, they're the team slowly trying to scale up. They're having their eye of the tiger moment in the background, farming those waves. And I'm not going to say that this is not very G2 favored at the moment. But there's an opportunity to come back. Now, as an update, Maxlore is just checking his settings. And once we can sort everything out, we will be getting back into game. And it looks like it's happening right now. So here we go, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, I've said it so many times, but it's game one. And remember the stakes. So high for the side of ROCCAT. And for G2, it's all about pride. It's all about prestige. They've already secured themselves that first seed, but they want to secure themselves the undefeated split. No team has taken them down yet in a best of three. Will ROCCAT be the first? Can they potentially unseat Fnatic from the playoffs? For now, it's looking a little grim.
And while I admit, yes, you are correct. There is the late game possibility for ROCCAT. I can hear Eye of the Tiger in the background. It's always a possibility. But I feel like in this situation, Rocky has lost his left arm, and it does make the fight a lot harder, especially when there's a 9,000 gold lead in favor of G2. We've already talked about the double Infernal Drakes.
I like how you stuck with the metaphor just as long as it was convenient and then abandoned it immediately.
Yep. And now G2, they're starting to group up. Could this be a 5v5 fight that we have been waiting for throughout this game?
Not going to be a fight over vision here, although we have seen that much more recently. ROCCAT scrambling to hold on to what they can. Another Baron potentially on the table. Pressing out the mid lane. Phaxi walking into the layer of Expect. PerkZ hoping to get something. Burns ult onto Maxlore, doesn't find much. Phaxi runs in onto Expect, hoping to solo zone him out. Wadid can't help with the chase down. Equalizer used defensively. ROCCAT have to be careful. Phaxi goes in. Gonna keep the damage coming. I don't know if he can kill Expect quite yet. It's a very slow burn. Massive shield from the scrap shield. But meanwhile, G2 are in the top lane. The fight doesn't even matter. Top laner's looking for the 1v1. G2, the team looking for the inhib. Now Maxlore trying to find an entrance in. Spooky Ghost not available quite yet. Maxlore gonna leap forward. Out comes Redemption. Nothing else gonna be committed. G2 just pull back unscathed. Phaxi gets snared up. Decent damage comes in. TP coming in from Expect. Will they be able to turn this back? ROCCAT, have you overstayed your welcome? For Maxlore, the answer is yes. Betsy, decent damage on the first tick. Hjarnan running back for his life. Has 3 items under his belt. Can do good damage. Betsy. No Spirit Fire quite yet.
And this is the great team fighting from G2 that we talked so much about. The fact that they knew they had the positional advantage to just rush down through the top lane. Maxlore and Phaxi, they were stuck in the river. They were trying to deal with Expect. And sure, he used his ultimate, but so did Phaxi. That risk of a Phaxi flank coming in was so low that G2 just felt confident enough to just run it through top lane. They get themselves an inhib. They kite backwards against the Nasus. They know that if they're just patient, they can wait for that overstep from ROCCAT. It arrives, and then the TP flank comes in from Expect. With Maxlore dead, it makes it very, very easy, swift transition over to the Baron. And another advantage gain for G2. And you can just see, this is the point at which they overstep their boundaries. They realize they cannot keep committing to the chase. And it's just worth praising how well G2 executed this fight overall. They knew, just keep kiting back, don't commit to the full 5v5, because that is what ROCCAT wants. and instead just wait for that small window, get the kill down onto Maxlore, and reassert dominance over the game.
And you look at how hard it is to fight when you're this Nasus, when you're the Sivir, when the fight doesn't start on your teams, when there's 4 members barreling down on Hjarnan, and Betsy knows if he walks in, they immediately turn to kill him. Hard to execute these fights, even harder as the cold lead continues to grow, 75.6 to 63.4. Elder Dragon up next, and should be easy for G2 to take with the power of the Kalista. But still having decent damage from Betsy. Maxlore maybe able to find a flank, finds an engage onto Trick, maybe look for the power. Bola does land, but Equalizer stops the fight for now. Now Zven going forward, flash in, keeps going. Marshall boys, that is huge damage, but Betsy, he can't get another auto attack. Ren comes out, gets taken down. There's another one, rack him up for Zven. And Maxlore and the rest of the ROCCAT have to turn tail and run.
The key player in that fight was actually Mithy. The fact that he gets the root down onto Wadid, preventing him from getting the wild growth down onto Betsy, is what enabled Zven to be able to kite him out and get the team fight victory.
It's just a slaughter, Vedius. Wadid's already taken down. Maxlore to follow. G2, they've already got a member in the mid lane. Trick happy to cut down that inhibitor. We thought maybe they could stall it out. Maybe this was their Rocky moment, but it's not. G2 coming in, looking to close out, and there's nothing Phaxi can do. Too many strong members left. Trick even hungry to find the kill, but G2, they want the perfect season. They don't want to give ROCCAT a chance. And while they're taking their time to close out here in this game 1, they will get it in the end, and it was decisive.
Zven gets himself his first Kalista win of the season as well. And it was a very impressive performance from laning phase to team fighting. But Mithy too, like, his impact in that final team fight was so monumental. It really is worth highlighting how this bottom lane of G2, in this series in particular, I feel have just really stepped up.
Yeah, not the perfect split, but the undefeated split the G2 are approaching. One step closer, one win away. It has to feel so good. I mean, you got to wonder for G2, what other accolades are there at this point? They've dominated Europe. They've been our 2-time champions. Now one step closer.
A perfect season with 0 deaths. So 13 series wins, 26 games of perfect games. That's the next goal. That's like playing LCS on hard mode.
We're talking about this, and every EU fan is like, no, international. Guys, focus, please. International. They can do whatever they want here.
Yes, that will be the next step. But still very impressive performance from G2, and I think they're looking to try and repeat it moving into the second game in the series. Let's see if ROCCAT can bring anything interesting out.
Completely agree. G2 are one win away from going undefeated this split. Our analysts are ready for a closer look at that game 1.